Hello, everybody. This is going to be a video over internal validity, specifically threats to internal validity. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means, what internal validity is, and then we're going to talk about, for the majority of the video, threats to internal validity. I'm going to try and go through these at a decent pace, but I'm also, well, I'm just going to warn you that there are a number of them, 8 specifically. So I'm going to try and keep it quick. I'm going to try and keep it brief. But it's going to be one of the longer videos, so hang with me. So I'm going to share my screen with you. All right. So again, let's start with what is internal validity. Well, in order to understand internal validity, we first need to reflect on what we need to make a causal claim. So you need several things. One, temporal precedents. Your causal variable must come before the thing that it causes, right? So if your IV is causing an effect on your DV, then your IV must happen before you measure your DV. The two, your IV and DV, must covary with one another. If indeed your IV is causing a change in, your DV, then the condition is going to be correlated with the dependent variable. But also, and most pertinent to this video, you need to make sure that any alternative explanation has been ruled out. All right. So internal validity is your ability to truthfully say that your IV is causing your DV, that your predictor is causing a change in your outcome variable. All right, that's internal validity. And anything that makes your ability to truthfully say that your independent variable is causing a change in your dependent variable, anything that makes it harder for you to say that because it serves as an alternative explanation, is a threat to your internal validity and therefore a confound. All right. So in this video, we're going to largely address, what are the major confounds. Now, I will say, and I'll come back to this at the end of the video, most of these confounds are fixed with basic experimental design. All right, basic good quality experimental design. And so, provided you're randomly assigning and you're holding things constant, provided you're doing those things, most of these threats are taken care of. All right, but if you're not, then all of these potential threats become, well, potential threats. So let's get going. First, ambiguous temporal precedents. Remember that first thing that you needed to make a causal statement, temporal precedents. Well, ambiguous temporal precedence simply refers to when it's not very clear that your IV is actually coming before your DV. All right, so, for example, let's say that you think that negative thinking leads to more severe depressive symptoms. Well, the temporal arrangement of those two variables isn't straightforward, and it's certainly not in concrete because it is entirely possible that as depressive symptoms become more severe, negative thinking becomes more prominent. So which is causing which isn't terribly clear. Now in an experiment, if you can manipulate one and see a change in your DV, you've resolved that. All right, you've taken care of ambiguous temporal precedence. Another is selection. All right, sometimes we end up, if we were to try and say, and I use this example very frequently in my other videos, that social rejection leads to a drop in self-esteem. All right, let's say that we were wanting to say that. Well, let's say that somehow all the low self-esteem people got into our social rejection condition. If that happens, then we have a selection problem because we've had all the individuals in one condition possessing some quality that makes them that causes them to already have a difference on the DV. So, sometimes when testing intact groups, we'll see those kinds of selection problems. So it makes our ability to say, hey, it was that social rejection manipulation that led to people having lower self-esteem. It makes our ability to say that harder. All right, it threatens our internal validity. History. All right. Sometimes, well, very frequently studies take time. All right, most studies take time. It sometimes months, depending on how quickly data collection is going. Sometimes it can take a year or more to collect data. Well, during that time, things happen. All right. When things happen during a study, those changes can have an effect on your research. All right. Especially if they're relevant to your IV. So in the example here I have, let's say that you were looking at whether disease concern influences decisions about morality. And let's imagine that you had everybody in your disease, you collected all the data for your control condition in the fall of last semester. And now, in this time when everybody's in quarantine, you're now trying to collect the data for your disease concern condition. Well, now you've got a huge history problem, because now you can't tell whether or not it's the public concern with being infected with the coronavirus. Now you might say, well, isn't that disease concern? It might be, but it's a history issue. And so you will never be able to say definitively that it was your manipulation of disease concern, or if it was the cultural event that was having the effect. And there's a whole lot of other things besides disease concerned going on right now. So it's not just everybody's concerned about the coronavirus. They're isolated. There's an element of distrust. There's a lot of other things going on. And so it would be hard for you to pin down what is causing it. Certainly you wouldn't be able to say that it was your manipulation of disease concern. So with both of these, and with the first several, doing a properly controlled study with random assignment fixes the problem. Because if you were randomly assigning participant to your disease concern or your control condition since the fall, and you would continue through now, yeah, some of the responses may be changed now. If anything, I imagine it would just be any differences you might find would be reduced. But across your sample, you've distributed each of your conditions across that historic event. And so it will have an equal effect, if any, in both conditions. So you balanced it. Regression. This refers to how when people score highly on one variable, they will often score in a less extreme way on other variables. And so this can affect us if we, for example, tried to recruit participants because they had some extreme score, like extremely low self-esteem, extremely high self-esteem, extremely high narcissism. If we selected them because of that quality, chances are that their responses on other things would go down. So for example, let's say you're wanting to look at the body image of those with low self-esteem. So, we might find that those with low self-esteem have better body image than we thought. But do they really? Or is it just the threat of regression? They scored really low on self-esteem, and they regressed back to the average, meaning it looks like they have better body image than we would have anticipated. All right. Again, a well-designed study experiment with random assignment and both methods of control can largely fix this problem. Instrumentation. Things were out. And even if we think of research assistants, even though, no, they're not instruments, right? They're not objects, but they are an aspect of data collection. And no two research assistants are identical, all right? So EEG nodes for EEG physiological measures, keyboards for reaction time measures, research assistants, different research assistants. Those individuals and instruments involved in collecting data break down and change over time. Well, studies take time. And so that change in equipment could potentially create an alternative explanation if, let's say, you're collecting all your control, all the people in your control condition first, and then all of the people in your experimental condition later, right? Because then all the people in your experimental condition are getting the potentially different research assistants, keyboards that are looser because people have been pounding on them for a while, EEG nodes that aren't as conductive as they were before. And so it might look like you might get a difference, or maybe those instrumentation issues reduce the difference. And so it changes what you look for. And so it can affect, it changes what you find, sorry. And it can affect your ability to say definitively that your causal explanation, your experimental, your IV is causing a change in your DV, because now you've got these poor instrumentation issues all lumped into your experimental condition, and they're not balanced. All right, so it's disproportionately affecting your experimental condition and not affecting your control condition. So now it becomes a confound. All right. Maturation, again, studies take time, right? Even if certainly if you have like a longitudinal study, right? So you're looking at things like, effects of education and age. But even in a study that's a one trial study, right? If your study's too long, it gets boring. Depending on what time of day your study is, it takes too long. People get hungry, right? Well, these small things that happen simply because of the passage of time, they can create problems. They can create threats. All right. So, in terms of a longitudinal one, let's say you want to say that being more educated makes people more empathetic, right? And so you look at participants' empathy each year of their undergraduate career. Well, it may be that something about aging makes people empathetic, and it has nothing to do with education, all right? So this design that you would have here would have maturation as a threat to internal validity, because it may be education, right? Because sophomores may be more empathetic than freshmen, juniors may be more empathetic than sophomores, seniors may be more empathetic than juniors. But so it may be education, but it also might just be that as they're getting older, they've seen more people, they've interacted with more people, and so they've encountered more perspectives, and that's what's leading them to be more empathetic. Not education, but simply getting older, having more experiences. You can have a similar effect with things like boredom, right? So you might have people doing a response time measure at the beginning of the study, but then you might have like 150 trials, a session in the middle for some questionnaires, and then have them do everything they did at the first of the study again. So another 150 trials. If you have your experimental condition first and your control condition last, or vice versa, then one condition is going to look faster than the other, but have nothing to do with your actual IV, even though it will look like it will. So let's say you have your experimental condition last and your control condition first. Well, in the first 150 trials, they're fresh. They just started, right? So they're going to respond faster. They're going to pay attention better, right? Leading to them respond faster. In the experimental condition, which is second, at this point, they've been at it for a while. They're tired. And so they're probably not going to pay attention as well. They're probably not going to respond as fast. All right. So it's going to look like the folks in your experimental condition are slower at responding than people in your control condition. And that has nothing to do with what the actual condition is. So it's a confound, all right, because it disproportionately affects each condition. Anytime something might have an effect, might serve as an alternative explanation, you want to make sure that that explanation was true, that that quality was present for people in all of your conditions, experimental and control. Attrition, also known as selective subject loss. All right, sometimes certain manipulations, are harder, more strenuous, more boring. For example, an exercise condition versus a no exercise condition. Well, because of these situations, people may drop out of those conditions at a higher rate. And if that's the case, then what you end up doing is you end up comparing people who had some quality that led them to stick to that harder or more strenuous or more boring activity to a group of general people who, some of which I'm sure are similar to them, they're similarly motivated, but a lot of them may not be. And so now again, this hardship, this strenuousness, this boring aspect, these are features that are occurring with your experimental condition. And so they're disproportionately affecting one. It's not balanced. You also might have testing effects, all right? Now, testing effects they're going to occur more when you use pre-testing or repeated measures, but this is when testing them once affects subsequent measures, all right? For example, learning effects, do it once, you're going to be better at it second time. Order effects, doing one condition before another and always doing it in that order might change your reactions, all right? Might change, or the participants' reactions. So, let's say you're looking at ratings of attractiveness, right? And you show all participants a very attractive individual before a moderately attractive. The ratings for that moderately attractive individual may plummet. It may look like people think that they're not attractive at all. But if all you were to do was flip the order such that the moderately attractive person was seen first before the highly attractive person, you might find that people's ratings of their attractiveness are higher. What you've seen is an order effect, all right? So again, doing simple methods of holding constant and balancing can fix that. So all through this, through all of these threats, I've talked about holding constant, these methods of experimental control, like holding constant and balancing. These are methods of methodological control, and they are always preferred. Methodological control is always preferred. But sometimes when we can't methodologically control for something, we can statistically hold it constant. So we might measure something that's co-occurring and then hold it constant statistically in our statistical analysis. Basically, we would statistically treat everyone as if they were equivalent on that variable. But methodological control is always preferred. And the two principal methods of methodological control are balancing. Sorry, I don't know what I had. Random selection there, sorry. Balancing, so random assignment, and holding constant, okay? And you can look to my other videos for those, a more in-depth conversation about those methods of methodological control. But here you see a table showing how each of those methods or each of those threats to internal validity can be solved by each type of methodological control. And so if you do a study and you hold things constant and you randomly assign or you use some other method of balancing, you've taken care of all of those threats. All right. So that's why I said, as long as you take care of you carefully design a study, you make sure that it is balanced, that you've held things constant, then most of these things get taken care of. Now I've got little asterisks next to maturation, attrition, and testing there. And the reason I do is because those can lurk. Those can find their way into a study that uses random assignment and tries to hold things constant. But provided you're taking extra care to make sure everything about your conditions is identical except your IV, then even those will be taken care of. All right, guys, that's it for this video on threats to internal validity. As always, if you have questions, send them my way. If not, then I hope you find this video useful. I hope it was informative, and I'll see you all later on.